Welcome to the Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast. I'm Denise Garth, Chief Strategy Officer at Majesco. If you're interested in the latest industry trends and new technologies that are reshaping the future of insurance, you're in the right place. Stick around to hear my discussions with industry leaders as we help uncover today's emerging opportunities for the future of insurance. Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast, the Future of Insurance Industry Leaders series. And I'm really thrilled today to have two key people from PwC that we're working with in our strategic partnership, Scott Busse and Sundeep Thakkar. Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hello, Denise.
Hello. Today's focus we wanted to really kind of talk about, which will be in a two-part series, is really around data and analytics at a broad level. Before we kind of dive into that, Sundeep, why don't you give a little background on yourself and your role at PwC? And then Scott, if you could do the same.
Sure. Thank you, Denise. Partner in PwC and part of the cloud and digital platform. We focus on data and analytics transformation for our insurance clients, which basically includes coming up with the underlying data transformation strategy for our clients, ensuring that we put sort of the right operating model and the architecture and the technology stack for them to be successful on this journey. I manage large data transformations for all sort of lines of business, life, group policy, property casualty. So happy to be part of this podcast. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Great. And Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Denise. So Scott Busse, I work closely with Sundeep. I'm also a partner out of our Chicago office, and I lead our data and analytics practice for insurance. And that really covers everything across the data lifecycle, from strategy to operating model design to data transformation through advanced analytics. And I've been in that business for about 25 years. So I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I've often said data is the lifeblood of this industry because everything we do is really based on data. But as an industry, we're really wrestling with a data conundrum, a fundamental problem with the operating model, the talent, and a technology perspective. What do you guys see as the challenges for insurers from these three perspectives, and what's holding them back from leveraging data? Sundeep, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think when we think about operating model, the sort of the promise of data, the insurance companies have caught on, and I feel like just spending time and investing in the data platform has begun about 20 years back, and P&C companies have done really well. Life and the other group benefits are sort of catching up. I think the fundamental problem in the operating model is just having that really clearly defined relationship between what I call the typical data organization, the information technology partners, and the business partners. That hasn't yet settled down. And then in the middle of all of this, as our clients are moving to the cloud, which fundamentally disrupts their business model and how they were organizationally set up, they've had all these on-prem data assets and all of the data investments, going back 20, 30, 40 years. And as they move to the cloud, they're struggling. How do we, ensure that that movement is well orchestrated? They can have seamless interaction between all of these groups. And just the dust hasn't settled down for them to really effectively get the ROI on those investments, at least from an operating model perspective. Scott, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I certainly agree with all that. And it's kind of interesting, if you think about this problem, this conundrum that you speak of, it used to be that there wasn't enough data available. And now we have almost the opposite problem where there's so much data available, it's how to filter through the noise. And that, that starts with organizing your data in a usable way and then applying analytics in a way that actually helps drive decisions. And everybody, not just in the insurance industry, but all industries trying to get better at this. And there's just not enough talent out there to go around. Even with the advances in technology that make this a little bit easier than it used to have been, their organizations still need people that understand the business in order to effectively use the information that they're presented, and even to define those requirements up front in the first place. So, a lot of times we refer to them as analytics translators. So despite the advances in technology, the gap in the talent has really become an issue that we're seeing across the industry.
Yeah, I think talent is a big area of focus. And obviously, talent has a lot of different dimensions to it. The talent at being able to really use the analytics types of tools and modeling. We've often thought about the actuaries where a lot of that was at, and a lot of actuaries have really transitioned into those types of roles. But I'm also seeing companies bringing in talent from outside the industry, from other industries that have really leveraged data and analytics at a far greater level, and kind of having that outside the box perspective. Do you think that's another aspect of this that's kind of a fundamental problem, guys?
I do. I think it's getting a little bit better. One of the things that the insurance industry, I would say, struggled with more so 5 years ago, that's getting a little bit better, is that attraction of talent. Because to be honest, a lot of people weren't coming out of college with data science degrees saying, I want to go into insurance. But I think that's changing a bit. And there's so much innovative analytic work going on in the insurance industry. And I think that some of that talent, whether it's people that are from other industries that are more experienced, or even campus hires right out of school, are starting to recognize the fact that the insurance industry is ripe for analytic talent, and there's tons of different ways to apply that knowledge across the value chain. To your point, this used to be a very underwriting and actuarial focused type of capability that insurers were looking for from an analytics perspective. But now it's across the value chain. It's we're looking at product design and understanding the customer, and distribution and marketing and finance, and really every part of the value chain within insurance can be enhanced with better data and better analytics. So, we need talent. We need it all over the place when you look across an organization.
Insurance is finally getting cool and sexy, huh, Sundeep?
I was going to say, I'll just add one other point on talent. This is talent. The talent problem with insurance is sort of a double-edged sword. Today, maybe it's not true, at least the last couple of years, but insurance companies have great employee retention. There's a lot of institutional knowledge they've built over the years, and they don't have a significant turnover as we see amongst other financial services organizations. And so what has happened is that they've not kept up with a lot of the learnings and development and change as the new technologies have rolled in, new business models have rolled in. So it's a little bit of a, they have all these great people. Fundamentally, if learning and development change management sort of programs are introduced and conscientiously, seriously, I feel that there is ability for them to solve the talent problem to some extent.
Getting on this journey and really kind of dealing with this data conundrum, many insurers are trying to move from their data repositories or their warehouses that have primarily been built on an on-premise kind of platform, and trying to move to the cloud where you have access, probably lots of other types of data and tools. What are the challenges and opportunities that you're seeing with the insurers you're working with, making that move from on-premise to cloud and having access to more data and tools?
I can start, Scott, and if you can jump on. I think that, fundamentally that's like probably one of the biggest questions and the problems we are dealing with amongst our client base right now. And just because there are too many choices, you have Amazon, Google, Microsoft. So as these insurers are making that decision, there are just too many choices, whether we go native, whether we do the best of breed. And if you marry that up with the kind of talent they have, it just becomes a very difficult scenario for them to land on what is the optimal path forward. Given with that, you think about all of the legacy investments they have in all of the data assets, user defined, buried in business, not knowing who's sending what. And you think about migrating all of that to the new cloud platform, it just becomes very, very difficult for them to land on what is the right path forward. And then one other thing I would add, the reason why this has become such a challenge is that we just talked about their operating model, and they have, teams and structures of organizations defined to ensure the care and feed of the on-prem assets. And as you move to the cloud, infrastructure and services and security all have to be managed differently. And the underlying organization structures just have not kept up to say, okay, what is the most now optimal structure to ensure that our journey to cloud, we do it in a timely manner and get all of the ROI we were promised for going to the cloud. So those are some of the things which I think come to mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, in addition to those complicated decisions around the technology stack, how to manage the conversion is just as big of a decision.
Oh, great point.
These tend to be very large, complex migrations, and strategically answering the question around how you want to do that, whether it's lift and shift versus a re-architect versus totally transforming as part of that conversion, becomes very important. We certainly always would recommend a strategy and a plan to guide that investment, because otherwise, if you do it in kind of an a la carte manner, it's very difficult. So that's where we see, I think, one of the biggest challenges, sort of this non-cohesive strategy to getting from where they are now on-prem into the cloud. So I think having that sort of guiding light is very, very important. And if you don't have it, that becomes, as big of a challenge as you're going to face. One of the nicer things is we're at a point where, we used to always talk about security being one of the biggest issues with moving to the cloud. A lot of carriers were uncomfortable with that, but at this point, insurers are finding that the cloud is as secure, more secure than what they have on-prem. So I feel like we've gotten over that hurdle. There's certainly security and privacy challenges that need to be addressed as part of the strategy, but they can with the technology that we have, with the providers that we're dealing with now. So at least we've kind of gotten through that hurdle, but now it's really about how do you plan that massive transformation in a way that guides your investment to get you to a cohesive place that makes sense for your organization.
Yeah, and we talked in preparation for this, it really gets to that technology stack. And how does a cloud provider stack like Microsoft Azure, on Amazon, a Google, or others compare versus a non-native option like Snowflake? And how does that fit into the journey? And where do kind of other solutions fit into this, including a lot of the InsurTech solutions that really kind of have developed some really fascinating kind of business specific types of solutions that really address very specific solutions? How do you kind of look at all of that and how it fits together?
Yes, very carefully and very comprehensively, but those are all part of the strategy that needs to be addressed. But, obviously you've got sort of your base platform, whether it's Azure or Amazon or Google, and, those come along with a variety of capabilities sort of natively. But we do see most carriers wanting to have that optionality. There's a lot of multi-cloud solutions out there. Snowflake is popular in the sense that, it is not necessarily native to one of the underlying providers, but, trying to figure out how all of that fits in definitely is part of that strategy. And of course, from an InsurTech perspective, there's so much investment right now in that space. What we are seeing is most of those InsurTechs are solving more of a niche need within the market, right? So you might have an InsurTech that's incredibly advanced, but they solely do augmented reality for auto claims, as an example. So I see InsurTechs definitely providing super advanced capabilities, but mostly in niches. And, potentially that ends up something that might be acquired, and we might see some consolidation over time. But I do think the InsurTechs play a really important role when we look at sort of the innovation and the advancement of the technology in the industry.
Sundeep?
What I would add is that, agree with everything what Scott said. I think the cloud, provider and, the path they take, yes, there are instances where you can get a cloud lock-in, a vendor lock-in, and then depending on your size and scale, your geographies, you could face some issues if there's an outage and have to be very careful about vendor lock-in. I think the other point is that, they really need to have a hard look at the types of problems they're looking to solve. So I'll give them an example. If you're deep within, you're really trying to figure out the customer related problems, really doing a deep dive in the type of problems you're looking to solve and really prioritizing them becomes a key consideration of the path you should choose. And the last piece I'll say about the InsurTech solutions, at least amongst my clients, the promise of external data and really, combining with everything which gets operationally generated. I was looking at a report from Novarica recently, and less than 15% of our top carriers really take advantage of that external data infusion with the data they generate to then land on a decision, use it in an operational manner. Getting on the cloud, choosing the right InsurTech ecosystem certainly can make it easier if that's what they choose to do. Essentially, like what business problem you're looking to solve must drive, the technology path they choose.
That's a really important point, Sundeep, and something that, we've thought a lot about, was really a key factor in our acquisition of Utilent last year, which obviously has a huge repository of loss control data, but they've also built out some models, but they're not going to be all the models that an insurance company needs. And those are only focused on P&C. So that ecosystem of InsurTechs is really, really important to be able to integrate them or embed them into the processes, within core technology, and do it in an easy way. And so, that's one of our big focuses, is that ecosystem development and the importance of that it gives you options depending on what's happening in the business at that point in time or what kind of data you got. I think there's a place for everybody to play. Would you guys agree?
Certainly.
Yeah, certainly agree. And, you made a really good point there, Denise, about the integration. And, that I would say that extends even more broadly to analytic models in
Yep.
general. And we've gotten to the point where I don't want to call analytics a capability or a commodity, because I'll be out of a job real quick. But, sometimes the analytics is the easy part, and the integration and getting the right information within the rest of the technology stack, that's where we really see a lot of the challenge, right? So, I think there's a lot of nice plug and play tools out there and analytic models that you can use, but really integrated into the daily processes is one of the bigger challenges that we see. And how do you operationalize those models?
And I think that gets to another topic that we talked about, in that this move to the cloud is so crucial, not just from the embedding of the analytics models into the processes, but it's just that access to new data sources and the capabilities. And in particular, from a data source standpoint, so much of the data that's growing, as you kind of said at the very beginning, Sundeep, we've got, or maybe it was you, Scott, where we had not enough data. Now we've got too much data. And a lot of that data is almost real-time dynamic data that's coming off of other types of technology like IoT sensors and stuff. It really is getting into other new sources of data about usability, social data, all that kind of stuff, that looking at the cloud and access to data sources is critical from that perspective. And in particular, one of the areas that we haven't talked about, so I'd like you to kind of comment on that, but also maybe more specifically around managing distribution channels, because we often are really focused in on the underwriting process or claims or maybe billing, but distribution channels has equally a real need and can really be optimized. What are you guys seeing on both of those fronts?
I think I can start on the data piece. You're absolutely right? So we've got so much data out there. It's how do you make the most out of it, right? So third-party data is really helping us understand customers on a personal level, right? We're looking at individuals, we're not looking at demographics. And we're also looking at behaviors, right? We're not just looking at, previously we weren't necessarily looking at sort of buying behaviors. We might have been looking at, this is a white female, 35 in this zip code, right? But now we're actually looking at the individual and what they want to do. So that excessive amount of third-party data now is allowing us to make decisions at a much more granular level and interact with customers. And I'm talking about the producers here as well, having those interactions with customers in a much more meaningful way, where they're talking to that individual. They're not talking to someone sort of that's just like them, right? As far as the distribution channels, what we're seeing carriers do a lot of right now is really understand their producers and maybe agency performance as an example, right? So now we have enough information to really look at, is this agency performing well because they're good at what they do, or because they're lucky they're in the right market and they're not surrounded by competition, right? So really understanding what that performance is at the agent and agency level is allowing insurers to guide investment in a way that allocates resources to higher performing agencies and gets training for the people that need it. So there's a lot of decisions being made now on how to treat agents, producers that are guided by much more granular levels of data kind of across the board.
Sundeep?
Yeah, to the first part, I mean, the move to cloud is crucial with this new data sources and capabilities. And if you think about just the proliferation of IoT and sensors, telematics, every carrier is now really ingesting a lot of information. And they've had traditionally on-prem Hadoop infrastructures, which are unable to keep up. And not only can they not keep up, they're not able to do any sort of meaningful analysis then to influence their pricing and risk models to take advantage of all of that analysis. So they're just not able to keep up. So, I mean, that's an easy sort of like, listen, you can continue to operate like this from an infrastructure perspective. You have to look to move to the cloud to just gain that elasticity, scale, and compute. The other piece on the managing distribution channels, a client of mine just recently, the CDO was asking us the question which he had been asked is that, can you define this? The holy grail for them was like, how do I define the best of breed producer? Who's doing well and why are they doing well? And if I can then emulate that, then we'd like all of our agents to behave exactly the same manner. It's not an easy question to answer. Are they in the right market? Are they getting the right leads? Are they approaching the potential customers the right manner by the channel of their choice? There's just so many fundamental ways to look at and break and slice and dice that problem. Not an easy answer to. And so you think about how do you get level of detail for a question of that nature. You have, unfortunately, you have to harvest more information. Now we see our clients really capturing, down to a geolocation of where their customers are or at what time of the day. They're tracking all of the behavior on their websites and then trying to make sense of it as to what pattern is going to be the most useful as they're trying to make that decision of what are they going to buy. How do you then put up a menu of choices so that they understand, hey, these are the best preferences to put forward to gain sort of the hook into that customer. So again, unfortunately, what new sources of data we see in managing distribution channels, it just continues to grow. And this is a problem where, we would expect that more analysis continues, because I don't know if our carriers have really figured this one out entirely.
One of the conversations I had with an insurer, a CMO there, was really on the P&C side, as an example, was the fight for shelf space with the independent agents. Yeah. And as we've been seeing a continued consolidation of the agencies and the agents. And with that consolidation, they have more influence and they will make more determination on where they're going to be placing business. Your point about, leads and what customers want and how they want to engage, being able to kind of funnel business into those top performing agencies will get them to really kind of have more trust and loyalty to you. And it really gets you to understand the profitability of those agencies. And I think that's going to become increasingly important as we continue to see kind of consolidation in the distribution channel arena, let alone an expansion into other channels that you really want to understand that. Would you guys agree?
Definitely. I would actually add to that one other point where as you expand that, the profitability, there's also the ask of the question, like, what is the cost to serve? Like, where are we actually spending our time with? It would be better for us to sever those ties as opposed to continue working with those agents. So, no, completely agree with you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I didn't mention lead management, but I should have, because the point that you make certainly hits home there, right? So, most carriers are looking at how do we manage our leads better, right? If we get a quote online, how do we route that to a call center? How do we, move that around to the right agent? What's the decay rate of that lead look like? So a lot of different carriers are looking at how to optimize that sales funnel to increase conversion, and analytics is the way to do that. And where we've seen some of these carriers be very successful, they're seeing conversion rates that are 2 to 3 times higher than what they may have been doing in the past without that insight behind those leads.
True. We're talking about a lot of change, dealing with that data conundrum problem, moving from on-prem to cloud stacks, data conversions, new sources of data. All of this is creating a tremendous amount of change, and the whole governance philosophy and structure needs to adapt with this change as well. Speak to what you guys are seeing as a more advanced kind of governance and philosophy around that within insurance companies that are really leading.
I can start, and I'm really excited that I finally feel like change management and governance is getting the respect that it deserves. After a couple of decades, it's finally not an afterthought. And if I think about what we do with our clients, we're seeing as much work around this as anything else, which is great. So it certainly needs to be part of that strategy and roadmap that I mentioned before. It needs to be integrated within that. It cannot be an afterthought. So how you manage your organization and the governance that you put around not just data, but also the program and then your operating model has to fit in with the strategy of what you're trying to do in order to transform, right? It can't be an afterthought. It needs to be part of it. And another interesting trend is, as a lot of organizations are going through these major technology transformations, they are using those programs as a catalyst for implementing data governance. So it becomes sort of a starting point, a catalyst to push data governance out through the rest of the organization by taking a transformative initiative and applying it there to start and then pushing it to the periphery of the organization.
Sundeep?
The price to pay if this isn't done right is huge. A lot of our clients are getting consent orders and really the wrong type of publicity. If you think about, there was GDPR, then California introduced CCPA, and with the advent of trying to use machine learning and analytical models, those questions are just around the corner where it'll be part of a regular and routine audit to demonstrate, like, hey, are those models ethical? Are you doing the right thing? And there's no sort of discrimination in how you price. And so not only we have to be able to prove that in a timely manner, there's going to be routine of the questions you get asked on such a regulated industry. So it's a must do. And I concur with Scott that finally we are seeing the right sort of engagement and uptick in this discipline to ensure that, hey, there's business ownership. We can trust and we can publish this information and use it wisely and feel good about it. And what has happened is that from a tactical perspective, we're definitely seeing this business and IT ownership, and the technology is also kept up. The notion of now there's a notion of a data marketplace with a lot of our clients are building this marketplace where the users of information are able to track lineage of what information it is, where did it come from, what does it mean, how am I using it, who else has asked for it, and really have that sort of an Amazon type of an experience internally to drive adoption of usage of the data assets. And so, yeah, I think the technology is kept up. We are seeing the right relationship between business and IT and really stepping up because, if you don't, the price to pay is very high. So they have to take this very, very seriously.
I couldn't agree more. And we've already seen a few kind of fumbles on that in the industry with some insurers having to kind of backtrack on some of that. So it's got a lot of not just ethical aspects, but it's got a lot of brand challenges associated to it as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So the way I like to kind of wrap up these sessions is ask my podcast colleagues here to pick one word or phrase that describes the future of insurance. What would it be and why? So Sundeep, let's start with you.
I'd say it's like insurance is ripe for disruption. And the reason I say that is that probably a cliche statement now, but the change which we had anticipated to happen now, all of that has come together in the last couple of years, the advent of cloud and just the business models changing and the entry of insurtechs. And fundamentally, the underlying processes on the insurance have not changed. So they are just ripe for change. Something big, momentous is bound to happen in very near future. So I would go with disruption.
And you, Scott?
Well, I'm a big Yogi Berra fan, so maybe I'll steal from him and say it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. But if you wanted to really nail it down, I think, and it's similar to what Sundeep said, I would say dynamic, right? Because we don't really know where it's going. It is very uncertain. It's exciting given all of that. But yeah, I'll say dynamic.
I love that word. That's a new word I haven't heard used. So guys, thanks so much for your insights here around data. I think that there's so much opportunity ahead that insurers really need to kind of step back and, to your point earlier, kind of look at their strategy and how are they going to transition to that, because it's going to be kind of one of those defining elements that will drive growth, drive profitability, and also I think just drive customer experiences. So thanks so much for this, and we'll talk again soon and dive into analytics.
Sounds good. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you, Denise.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast. Be sure to sign up for our email list and follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss out on our next episode. I'm Denise Garth, wishing you a happy podcasting.